Tonight on Talking Points, President Trump's former personal attorney and fixer Michael Cohen on the Hill last week. His testimony and document dump expanding the scope of the congressional investigations into Trump.
And later, no deal at the second summit for President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The event cut short before leaders reached an agreement, sparking controversy for Trump back home. And
Senate Republicans are crossing the aisle in a rare rebuke of President Trump, endangering Trump's contended state of emergency on the southern border. All that and more tonight on Talking Points. Good evening, I'm Shama.
And I'm Gilat Melamed. Welcome to Talking Points. President Trump's former attorney took the stand on Capitol Hill Wednesday, delivering a highly anticipated testimony to Congress. During the public testimony, Cohen spoke to Congress for 5 hours.
I have lied, but I am not a liar. And I have done bad things, but I am not a bad man. I have fixed things, but I am no longer your fixer, Mr. Trump.
Michael Cohen testified before the House Oversight Committee. President Trump's former attorney described the president as a racist and claimed that Trump is the subject of a criminal investigation by the Southern District of New York. Cohen has pled guilty to numerous financial crimes and will soon begin his 3-year prison sentence. From WikiLeaks to Stormy Daniels, Talking Points analyst Michael Furnari is here to tell us what we need to know from Cohen's 5-hour testimony.
Michael Cohen's testimony before Congress revealed few secrets or news stories. The topics of discussion were largely familiar, as Stormy Daniels, WikiLeaks, and Russian business ties were the focuses of Cohen's testimony. Cohen did little to provide the bombshells or smoking guns that some may have expected from the president's personal attorney. Mostly, Cohen took shots at President Trump's character and provided background details to the legal controversies that have loomed over the Trump presidency. In his opening statement, Cohen attacked Trump's character.
He is a con man, and I am ashamed.
When asked, Cohen estimated that he had personally threatened roughly 500 people and entities on behalf of President Trump. Cohen also claimed that President Trump was aware of campaign staff coordinating with WikiLeaks.
Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Cohen repeatedly referred to a New York State criminal investigation related to President Trump. Cohen did not elaborate on the investigation, Trump's connection to it, or any information he may have provided. What we do know is that Cohen's documents were seized by law enforcement in a raid on his home. Without legally actionable testimony, those documents may be what the special counsel is building their case on. And in the wake of the House Judiciary Committee's documents request from nearly 81 Trump-related entities, those documents, not flashy testimony, may be the focus of further investigations into President Trump.
Now, Michael, the Democrats have been very outspoken about this, but what have Capitol Hill Republicans been saying about the testimony?
Capitol Hill Republicans have, by and large, been pretty mum on this. They haven't really bought Michael Cohen's testimony. President Trump, in his typical fashion, chimed in on Twitter. He shared his thoughts about this whole scandal, this whole issue, a little bit earlier this week, and he was pretty skeptical. He called him a failed lawyer, and he said everything is totally contradicted in his testimony. So those are pretty harsh words. And the thing that most Republicans have really been focusing on is that Michael Cohen has perjured himself in the past. And I think his record of kind of lies has really allowed or kind of given Republicans plausible deniability with this testimony.
So is that one of the reasons why we're kind of seeing Republicans maybe not rush to fall on a sword to kind of save Trump on this one?
Absolutely. I think people are kind of waiting and seeing here because it seems unlikely that impeachment proceedings will be able to come through before the elections, and with so much up in the air, it seems like people are a little more willing to stay put than they are to kind of rush to some hasty condemnation.
Now, the House Democrats are saying they're launching an investigation to 81 people and groups connected to the president. Do you think Michael Cohen's testimony is going to play into this?
It's tough to see that because so much of what Michael Cohen has provided is not necessarily public. We know that he's talked to enforcement about Stormy Daniels, he's talked to the public about Stormy Daniels. But what documents he has or didn't have, what communications he had or didn't have, and not just the communications, but how President Trump responded in those communications is kind of what's up in the air here. And I think that's what's going to kind of provide either the legal basis to go take further action or not, and that's up in the air right now.
But how realistic are those outcomes? I mean, we're talking about going through these documents. How likely are we to actually get something from this?
It seems unlikely because I think so much of what's happening is so complex and so hard to understand. It requires so much reading that I think it's a little too complex for maybe people to understand quickly. If you look at the history of political scandals, things like Watergate are kind of easy to understand, whereas some of the stuff Hillary Clinton faced, like the Uranium One scandal, it takes a lot to kind of process, and I think that's where Trump is right now. Things are so convoluted that I think it's going to be difficult for the public really to take a side accurately.
All right, Michael Furnari, definitely something that we're going to be sifting through in the coming weeks. And more than 10 Democratic candidates have now officially declared their candidacy for the presidency in 2020. Some of them, like Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, are familiar names, while others are looking to build their name recognition through campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire. Former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper became the latest name to throw his hat in the race. Talking Points analyst Anthony Dabbundo joins us at the desk to discuss the new developments in the 2020 primary. So, Anthony, welcome. So who are we looking at? Who are some of the new names that have just announced and that we're going to be looking at?
Well, we all know the Kamala Harrises, the Amy Klobuchars, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Bernie Sanders. They've been in the race for a few weeks now. They're really getting their campaign churning. But there's been a few new names that not many people know that much about. There's Governor Jay Inslee of Washington and Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado. Now, neither of them are currently the governor of their state, but they both have a lot of popularity and have passed a lot of liberal agendas, notoriously marijuana legalization, which is becoming more and more of a big selling point for the 2020 campaign for the Democrats. But it's unclear if they're going to be able to garner this kind of support nationally. You need to win a primary. Colorado and Washington, two smaller states, two mostly white states that don't matter as much in the grand picture of the Democratic primary.
Now, someone who garnered a decent amount of national support in 2016 was Bernie Sanders, but how is he approaching 2020 differently?
Yeah, Senator Sanders just gave a huge speech in Chicago, Illinois to kind of kick off his 2020 strategy.
So who's got these early endorsements? When we look at stuff like this, all right, so who's getting kind of this early establishment vote? Who's getting money right now?
Well, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and Amy Klobuchar have picked up the most total endorsements so far, but the majority of the endorsements that have come in have come from people from their own state. So the majority of the New Jersey Democratic delegation has endorsed Cory Booker, while the majority of the Minnesota delegation has endorsed Amy Klobuchar. Nothing too crazy, but one interesting thing is that Joe Biden has already picked up numerous endorsements across the board, and he hasn't even entered the race yet.
No, he hasn't entered the race. Another person who people are speculating about is Beto O'Rourke, who also hasn't entered the race yet. But what is their timeline looking at? Can we expect a decision soon?
Biden hasn't really, there hasn't been much of anything about Biden. I mean, he's been very quiet in the entire race. Everybody's kind of going about their campaigns, and people just keep asking, where's Biden, where's Biden, where's Biden? We don't know. Now, Beto O'Rourke, on the other hand, he's giving more and more clues that he's going to enter the race very soon. He's doing all the things that a normal campaign would do just before they're getting ready, and he's taking stances on key issues already and trying to get his name back out there after he kind of has dipped from the spotlight since the end of the elections.
So we're taking a look at all these Democratic candidates, but we have to understand that there's a Republican candidate, and it's the current incumbent president. So what are the chances, what is Trump's re-election campaign looking like, and how is he faring against some of these newcomers?
Right, so now that he's the president and running for re-election, it's a little bit different, and to the point where now he has his staff like Sarah Huckabee Sanders to serve the press every day, but he needs a campaign press secretary. So he recently just hired Kayleigh McEnany, who was a CNN contributor in 2016. She then was on the RNC communications group in 2016. Now she's going to be the new communications director and the new press secretary for the campaign. He also hired a finance director and administration director. So he's doing everything you'd expect for the president to form his committee and get ready to go for what's going to be an exciting 2020 race.
That Iowa caucus, 11 months away.
11
Thanks,
months.
Anthony.
Absolutely.
Up next, the former Canadian Justice Minister alleging months of pressure from top government officials to defer prosecution of an embattled Quebec construction company. What this could mean for Canadian elections right after the break.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham-bam minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high-five.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Leaving hot coals improperly extinguished can cause a wildfire.
Hey guys, it's Smokey!
It looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown, and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Smokey, catch! Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
The highly anticipated second summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ended early. Trump left the negotiating table in Hanoi, Vietnam on Thursday without a deal. My co-host Gilat Melamed is in studio to explain how the summit ended and where the talks can go from here.
Thanks, Elijah. A talk 8 months in the making. The first meeting between the two leaders in June ended with vague aspirational goals of denuclearization. The second go-around, though, was not enough to put those goals into action. Trump and Kim could not reach a deal. Trump left Vietnam before the planned signing ceremony. The White House says Kim wanted all sanctions lifted, and in return, North Korea would shut down its main nuclear site. The lifting of all sanctions, though, was a non-starter for the U.S. And while the closing of that nuclear facility would be a step towards denuclearization, it's not the only facility North Korea has. National Security Advisor John Bolton says he's okay with the no deal.
Well, you're speaking in the terms of conventional diplomacy, that, my goodness, there's no deal. How horrible. I would say it the other way. If you can't get a good deal, and the president offered North Korea the best deal it could possibly get, no deal is better than a bad deal.
Other news coming out of the summit, Trump not holding Kim responsible for the death of Otto Warmbier, the college student who fell into a coma in a North Korean prison, which led to his death. Just over a year ago, the president received praise for bringing Warmbier's body home, and then invited Warmbier's parents as his guests to last year's State of the Union. Now the president is siding with Kim, saying the leader did not know.
So, Gilat, one quick question. So with these talks kind of falling through, what is the outlook for North Korean denuclearization now? Yeah, well, the U.S. Special Envoy to North Korea, he's meeting with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee tomorrow, and he's going to debrief them on ongoing negotiations. What are these ongoing negotiations? We don't know, but we might see more aides and advisors playing a role before, if the two leaders were to ever meet again, have more of an ironed out deal from people lower down on the totem pole before they meet, and, hopefully would sign a deal, because both of them, they don't want to leave empty-handed again, I'm sure. Of course. Gilat, always great seeing you back in the trenches. Thanks. Former Canadian Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould took the stand last week, revealing her account of the alleged pressures from inside Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's cabinet. To add to the drama in Ottawa, another of Trudeau's major cabinet members resigned today, Treasury Board President Jane Philpott. Talking Points Analyst Jack Watson returns to give us the latest in the SNC Lavalin controversy.
Gilat, that's right. The former Justice Minister had some pretty serious allegations in her testimony to Canadian Parliament Wednesday, and now another former central figure of Trudeau's cabinet is slated to do the same. Now, just to reiterate, SNC Lavalin is a Canadian engineering giant. They're a massive employer based in Montreal. The center of the allegation is that there was internal pressure against Wilson-Raybould to seek a deferred prosecution agreement, a DPA, or in other words, SNC Lavalin in its legal recourse against the company for alleged bribery. So back it up a little bit. So there have been several resignations from the Trudeau cabinet in the past few weeks, including Wilson-Raybould and former Chief of Staff Gerald Butts. Since then, Jody Wilson-Raybould has testified, and here's what Wilson-Raybould had to say. The Prime Minister again cited the potential loss of jobs in SNC Moving. Then, to my surprise, the clerk stated or started to make the case for the need for a DPA. He said, quote, there is a board meeting on Thursday, September 20th with stockholders. Quote, they will likely be moving to London if this happens, and there is an election in Quebec soon, unquote. Now that's what Jody Wilson-Raybould initially testified. So what Wilson-Raybould is essentially trying to say is that in a private meeting on September 17th of last year with the Prime Minister himself, Trudeau advocated a DPA for SNC Lavalin because of job loss reasons. Then the office clerk brought up the political impact of prosecuting SNC. Now, Quebec is an important voting bloc in the October Canadian general election, and it's no secret Labour wants to maintain those votes, and it's also no secret that SNC is a massive employer in Quebec. But Wilson-Raybould argued that it was wrong of Trudeau's cabinet to allegedly cite those political impacts of SNC's prosecution and pressure her decisions supposedly for those political reasons. And Gilat, as you mentioned before, another top minister, Jane Philpott, resigned today, further complicating the situation. Now, while Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is calling for Trudeau to resign and asking the Canadian police for an investigation into an obstruction of justice charge, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is, as of now, denying any wrongdoing.
So he's denying these wrongdoings, but how will this impact him in the upcoming election?
Well, it's absolutely no secret this is going to impact him one way or another. Now, whether there are legal ramifications for this, it's unknown as of now, but I do believe that there's going to be a serious political impact for this to the Labour Party by proxy and to Justin Trudeau in his bid to get his party back into the majority, or rather to maintain the majority that he currently has. They currently have 180 seats in that Canadian Parliament.
So very quickly, what can Trudeau do right now to stop the bleeding?
So this testimony coming up this Wednesday for his former Chief of Staff, Gerald Butts, that could reveal a lot. And the damage control that he has set up for that testimony is going to be very impactful, I think.
All right.
Thanks, Jack.
Jack Watson, a uniquely Canadian controversy. And the hot and cold nuclear rivalry between Pakistan and India is heating up once again. We'll break down the status of the standoff and what it can mean for India's upcoming elections. All that and more right after the break.
You've messed up your son's haircut.
Mom?
Do you A, try to fix it?
Like it never happened.
B, work with what you got? Or C, show solidarity?
Thank you, baby.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
And the nuclear threat between South Asian neighbors India and Pakistan has reached a 20-year high last week. Pakistan's capture and release of an Indian fighter pilot along its contested border last Wednesday escalated tensions between military forces as both countries try to enlarge and upgrade their military capabilities. The ongoing threat of a nuclear standoff looms. And while the international community watches for now from the sidelines, Talking Points analyst Tyler Lowell is here to make sense of the history and tension between these nuclear superpowers. So, Tyler, thank you for joining us. Talk a little bit about Kashmir and what it means to these two countries.
Absolutely. So it's this tension, this conflict that's happening between them, it goes back over 70 years, right? And I think with all these international conflicts, it's really difficult, but if you were to distill it down to sort of its essence, it's primarily a conflict over land, and it's a conflict over ideology. So looking back to August of 1947, when India gave up control of the region, Pakistan and India split it. Pakistan then became, the sort of region became Muslim majority, the Indian side became Hindu majority, and as a result, you know, over those 70 years, there's been these ebbing and flowing kind of conflict as both sides try to overtake the entirety of the region.
So it's been 70 years. Why is the conflict boiling over again now?
I think, obviously there's like a sort of chain of events, right? But this particular moment has been isolated back to a February 14th, so a Valentine's Day bombing in the southern region of Kashmir, where a Pakistani sort of militant committed a suicide bombing that ended up killing 40 paramilitary Indian folks. And it was one of the largest, I think in 30 years, one of the largest attacks. And so as a result, that's gotten India spun up into a fervor. Their elections are right around the corner, and there's a lot of pressure now on their Prime Minister Modi to avenge these attacks. But who knows what that might look like.
Obviously, India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed nations going at each other's throats, makes the international community very nervous. What can the international community do right now to kind of bring things down a little bit?
Well, personally, I think pay attention, right? We were talking a little earlier about how this issue is such a big thing, but it kind of isn't getting as much attention from the international community as it needs to. And I think a part of that has to do with it's being overshadowed by North Korea, right? These sort of denuclearization talks are happening. Meanwhile, they've got 300 nukes, pointed at one another. But you do have people like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying that they need to sort of take meaningful, Pakistan, meaning they need to take meaningful action against terrorism on their soil, because that's part of India's sort of qualms, is that they're supporting and they're encouraging these militant, this fostering of militants.
Tyler, this is clearly an ongoing situation. Yes. What can we expect going forward?
It's hopefully people watching, right? And so, today the transportation between the two countries has reopened, so these sort of hot tensions of war have finally cooled. But these aren't isolated incidents, right? And they're happening kind of with a little bit more frequency. So I think what we can expect going forward is more attention on the issue. Hopefully.
All right, well, we know you'll be monitoring it for us. Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
Mass protests erupted in Algeria this weekend after the country's president declared that he'd seek a 5th term in office. The demonstrations were Algeria's largest since the Arab Spring protests that ended back in 2012. Here to explain why the public is so outraged over the president's decision is Talking Points analyst Brandon Ross.
183. That's how many people were injured in the protest all over Algeria on Friday. President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has been leading the country for 20 years and has now made it clear he wants to lead for 5 more. Bouteflika's administration is one that has allowed for little political dissent, but for most of his presidency, people have actually been okay with that. He presided over the end of a decade-long civil war with Islamist insurgents in 2002, 3 years into his first term. Though the war came to an end, Bouteflika maintained an emergency rule in the aftermath, and the Algerian people were typically willing to give up some freedoms so long as they were safe. The emergency rule ended in 2011, but the president maintained a ban on street protesting. This came into a head in the Arab Spring protests back in 2012, but the strong state police force was able to crack down on them. Since then, like most of the country's history, politics have been mostly out of the public sphere. People tend to fear the country's security forces, especially since practically all of the country's leaders have been veterans of Algeria's 8-year war for independence with France. Now, Bouteflika suffered a stroke back in 2013, but he was re-elected the next year without much campaigning. He's barely been seen in public since. Many Algerians believe he's too old to continue running the country, and similar to 2014, he had to get approval from Algeria's Constitutional Council on an amendment to allow him to run again. But yesterday, Bouteflika got that approval and publicly announced his run. Since then, the president has received the endorsement of his FLN party and, in turn, a number of other prominent players, so it seems unlikely he'll face a significant challenge.
All right, thanks, Brandon. Senate Democrats may now have enough votes from Republican counterparts to block President Trump's national emergency declaration. Looking ahead to a possible presidential veto after the break. Stay with us.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees.
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail.
Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Fancy pants peanut butter? A big screen television? You haven't even bought a sofa yet. A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers. Feed the pig.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
And looking ahead, the Senate may overturn President Trump's national emergency declaration, setting up the president for his first veto in office. 4 Senate Republicans, including Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, and Tom Tillis, crossing the aisle with Democrats in a rare rebuke of the Republican lockstep, giving Senate Democrats the 51-vote majority needed to pass a resolution blocking funding for Trump's border wall. Last week, the House passed the resolution giving Congress the power to end the emergency.
But Senate Democrats must stay united and siphon off at least 4 Republicans to avoid a tiebreaker ballot from Vice President Mike Pence. Still, 2/3 of both the House and Senate are needed to override any presidential veto. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell told reporters today that such a majority is unlikely. Trump has yet to use his presidential veto power since taking office, so it's unclear if he will follow through on an override.
Regardless, the break exposes the growing divides within the Republican caucus, and this could complicate court cases focusing on the national emergency, since it's an explicit example of Congress pushing back against the declaration. So I want to bring in Michael Furnari on this. Michael, you said that you saw this more as kind of Republicans trying to prevent a political move from happening to them in the future.
Absolutely. I think the good comparison to make here is to go back to 2013 when Harry Reid nuked the filibuster. And we saw in subsequent years, it was a move that they thought was smart at the moment, but it was the reason that President Trump really had unilateral power to get those Supreme Court nominees through with little opposition. I think there's the same sense here that if there's a Democrat president in a year and a half, they can use this same declaration to take action on an issue like gun control.
And moving forward, this is, at least when I look at this, I see it a lot like the fight on Obamacare, where Trump is pushing an agenda very, very quickly, and maybe Republicans aren't necessarily ready to move that fast on it with him.
And I think when it comes to moving fast, it's important to look at the difference of the way Republicans feel about immigration policy in general and the way they feel about this, using the national emergency declaration to get the money for immigration, not wanting to expand those presidential powers, which is a core tenet of the Republican Party, is not wanting to expand government in this way. So I think that's kind of where we see the difference there, and it's unique.
No, I would definitely agree with that. Michael?
Absolutely. One point about that is that the wall may not be a permanent solution, because if there is a Democrat president in 2 years, they could just stop the construction pretty easily, but that crossing the line of executive action is something you really can't take back going forward. So I think that kind of sense of permanence is something that's really weighing on Republican minds right now.
Ultimately, do we think he's vetoing this?
Absolutely. I don't know how he doesn't.
Thank you.
All right. And that's all the time we have for Talking Points tonight. Remember, you can see all of our webisodes, episodes, and specials on CitrusTV.com/talkingpoints. I'm Elijah Shama.
And I'm Gilat Melamed. Thanks for watching, and have a great night, Syracuse.